fast reporter, James Kalm, the guy on the bike, and it's a frosty Sunday morning, and we are here on the Lower East Side. And we're going to run into an exhibition and try to talk to this guy, Erik Breejen, here at Freight+Volume. Well, we'll do a little sweep around the front gallery here. And then we'll buttonhole this gentleman, Erik Breejen.
That's me.
So we're here on a Sunday morning, and the title of the show is, what was it again?
Song of the Earth.
Song of the Earth. And this is your first show in 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that?
Yeah, 2.5 years.
So this represents 2.5 years worth of work. One of the things I wanted to talk about was the fact that I kind of noticed that your direction has changed a little bit. I know that in the last group of works, you had figures, people's faces, and things like that. And I think these pieces basically, right, you've gone to, is this landscape mostly, or what are the images?
This is not, it's not an overt landscape. Some of them are.
We'll see those in the back room.
But these are more, concerned with color, but I like what happens when you set certain variables and then allow something suggesting an image to emerge. But they're really almost like controlled experiments in a way. People look at pieces like this and some of the others, and they all often say color theory. And while what I'm doing is informed by a basic understanding of color theory, I think it would be more appropriate to call it color practice, because it comes from a lot of trial and error.
So a lot of this, you're just basically kind of working with abstract notions of fading one color into another color, sort of playing contrasts off against each other, and
yeah, I think of them as scales, and I'm thinking of them
let's look at this
as musical notes, possibly, or sequences. So in this one, for instance, I have 9 reds and 9 greens. I did it on underpainting that goes from a very dark blue to a very light blue. The text gets larger in the middle and then goes back.
Yeah, I was noticing that. You got larger text here in the middle.
Yeah, that was something I made a concentrated effort to do with a number of the paintings in this show, because when I was making the portraits, the text was all the same size, which I was doing to enable the image, but I wanted to break free from the restrictions of the image with these paintings.
Well, that's what I thought was kind of interesting, was that these pieces, you're much more focused on just the letters, the way the letter is laid out, and we were just talking about kind of the way a text might be affected by the way it's laid out on a page, and the scale, and the color, and these different things. Actually, I like this little wall of small studies.
Yeah, some of these, with the shorter phrases, it's interesting that they're kind of catchy phrases, or perhaps call them one-liners.
Right, or aphorisms, something like that. Where do you get your text? Let's read this one. Once in a while, you get shown the light in the strange of places, in the strangest of places, if you look right at it.
Look at it right.
Look at it right.
So you have to look at the painting right to get the
okay.
The light. It's kind of a pun there. So some of these phrases I've literally seen on bumper stickers. And the idea would be you would want a slogan like this to be as easy to read and clear as possible. And I've kind of turned that on its head by making this one pretty difficult to read.
Let me ask you this question, Erik. In the last month or so, I've actually covered 2 or 3 shows with other artists that are dealing with text. I don't know whether you're familiar with Leslie Robert and her work.
Yes, yeah.
And John J. O'Connor just last weekend. Do you feel like this might represent some kind of a sensibility that's emerging, or do you think that this is just people have been doing this for a long time? And
I've been working with the text for over 11 years, and I'm sure John and Leslie go as far back, if not much further. It's funny, John actually introduced me to the work of Leslie, put us both in the show together.
Yeah, they're great.
I think it's just a scheduling coincidence. I find it, I know that text can be seen as a category, but I always just think of them as paintings. And
so
I'm surprised when people want to make that distinction they say like, oh, I don't like text paintings or things like that.
So this doesn't come down to you as maybe a branch of conceptual art. There was a whole movement in the late 60s, early 70s where they were saying that art was going to kind of evaporate and the only thing that was going to be left was words and text. And so you had a lot of conceptual artists that would basically, that's it, they would write aphorisms, they weren't painting them. But
Right.
this is not
too much of the stuff I love about painting out of it. I mean, I love
Exactly.
color, I love texture, I love surface, I love all the formal stuff, and that's what I'm playing with here. And I don't see why you can't have verbal and visual language interacting with it.
Okay, read this one to me. Sometimes.
You're doing it well. They're color coded.
Oh,
So here, let me show you a path. So they always, I do throw the viewer a little bit of a bone with these. They always start with the other word end. So and each word is distinctly colored. So sometimes we live, no.
oh, so you're sort of moving through the spectrum of colors here? Okay.
Way, but our own. Okay. Sometimes we live no particular way but our own.
All right, let's move on back and we can look at some of the larger paintings. And these are also some of the pieces that you're basing on landscape. Let me come in and we'll just do a sweep to give people an opportunity to see the installation. Some of these larger pieces also, I was thinking we should talk a little bit maybe about poetry and some of your ideas about poetry. I thought this was kind of an interesting piece because you've got a background in here that's more painterly, could I say? A lot of the stuff is on monochrome backgrounds, but this one you can visually see the striping.
This one has an interesting origin because the original conception was to do it on this square panel and we'll get to this other one later, but to start using smaller rings getting larger towards the center. So it's like one of the paintings we just saw where the text got larger in the middle, except it's doing it from all around instead of just from top to bottom.
We were talking also about, text, at least reading English text, you go from left to right and top left corner to bottom right corner.
Yeah.
And so in certain ways, you're kind of playing with the way that reads
right.
and flipping it and doing it backwards. But does that all kind of inform the way you design the paintings? And I think this is maybe one of the best examples.
Yeah, what we were just looking at, it's not really a study, but it led to this one. And again, it's the most extreme example of using large and small text.
And this piece is what, about 5 foot square, something like that? Okay.
So I want it to be a situation where you're confronted with this text, you can start to identify some words and then you're not really sure where you're supposed to begin. Usually with my paintings you would begin in the upper left and just read it in a conventional layout, but this one doesn't work that way. It's a fairly familiar text, it's actually Beatles lyrics. And so my hope is that if someone wants to spend some time with it, they'll figure out the system in which it's arranged.
Listening to the color of your dreams, it is not living, it is not living. Playing the game, okay.
Existence to the end of the beginning. And then it repeats of the beginning as it does in the song, and I have that as the outer ring of the painting, which I thought was a nice coincidence because that's, in a sense, the traditional way. It's the beginning of the painting, but it's actually the end. So it begins in the center, and if you figure out that it's actually it's a counterclockwise read going out through these square spirals, turn off your mind,
relax and float downstream. It is not dying.
It is not dying. This is John Lennon appropriating Timothy Leary's The Psychedelic Experience, which itself appropriated the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's about ego death, and I think that's a concept that we could all use a healthy dose of at this point in time.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about poetry, and we'll come over here and look at this piece. I was asking you about where you got the text. You said that one was a Beatles lyric. Mm-hmm. How about something like this?
This is an interesting combination. I wanted to, with the portrait, there was a very clear logic that it was the subject's words made the subject's portrait. In these, I want to create interesting juxtapositions that are open to interpretation. So it begins with some quotes from Herzog, talking about the...
I'm in the wrong place here, or in the wrong life. Did I not recognize...
As I sat in a train that raced past the station and did not stop, that I was on the wrong train? And did I not learn from the conductor that the train would not stop at the next station either, 100 kilometers away? And did he not also admit to me, whispering with his hand shielding his mouth, that the train would not stop again at all?
Okay. Werner Herzog, okay. Is that from Fitzcarraldo? Or?
That's when he was making Fitzcarraldo.
Okay.
He had to reshoot almost the entire film. It was like Apocalypse Now, and that was an extremely demanding, trying shoot where the filmmaker experienced an existential crisis similar to that of the character in the film. The text you're looking at now is actually William Blake's Sunflower poem.
There's always been an analogous quality between painting and poetry, and I wanted to ask you about poetry and if you see these as poetry, and what kind of do you think makes poetry or would make poetry important, and do you think you're making poetry here?
Am I making visual poetry, or am I?
Both.
That's a lot. Well, there's something I think about when I have used poems, is that I've disrupted the placement on the page, which I think is often very important with poems. And with the Blake here, though, I've actually managed to, with the last few lines, keep it intact as he wrote it. At first, it's broken up because my text is small, and so you're getting multiple lines in one area, and then it starts to become actually the way he laid it out, where the youth pined away with desire. Arise from their graves and aspire where my sunflower wishes to go. And this poem, I first learned of this poem when I was a teenager, and there was a street person in Berkeley who called himself Mike the Psych, and then he proceeded to recite the poem from memory, and he would do it every time I met him. And sometimes he would call himself Mike the Poet, but I don't think he wrote any poetry. I think he just recited this one Blake poem. But when he would say, "Weary of time," that really struck a chord with me. And there's something about all of these texts combined with the 2001 Space Odyssey that go together.
You know, and you were talking about the way that things are laid out. But this text is all written to be seen. You know, some poets, and this kind of brings up the weird quality of poetry. Some people think poetry is only to be spoken. Some people think that it is to be written. Some people see it as something to be sung. And in certain ways, that kind of amorphous kind of, you were talking about not knowing exactly what poetry is and what it means and how it's written, those are all kind of part of what you're playing with here?
Well, it loosens up the reading a bit, particularly when I keep the colors of the words intact. So, for instance, when I'm trying to make an image, I'll often break up the word to make multiple colors in it. And that makes you can read ridge and, it doesn't, nonsense words. However, when they're left, as complete words, you can start to read did not train not kilometers and kind of start to have a visual reading and maybe a free association where you could make new texts and new meanings. And it's one of the ones we saw earlier, the red and green one, that's particularly true.
When you're working on this, do you hear these words in your head? I mean, do you actually think about the sounds and the pauses and things like that when you're writing this?
I do. I don't always try to approximate them. There have been pieces I've done where I've tried to suggest emphasis with the way I paint it, but with this one I'm going more for a mood. And in the middle we have John Muir.
Now, is there an image here? Is this based on a landscape?
It suggests a landscape. So what I did after my umpteenth viewing of 2000 Space Odyssey this summer, which I saw in 70mm at the Museum of the Moving Image, I was probably had the most profound experience seeing that film that I've ever had. It's one of these.
When you're not on psychedelics, right?
You don't need them, yeah. So what I did was the final sequence, which is this transcendental sequence where it's breaking down matter, space, time. He's going through the
flashing light period.
Yeah, I took many film stills from it and I actually collaged them together. So there's a part where it's showing these kind of alien landscapes, which are actually deserts in the U.S. that have been
colorized and photoshopped and tweaked.
The top and the bottom are actually based on those space vortex images that he's going through initially. So I took those and put them together, and then I made this from it. Because for me, here the text goes from large to small in the middle and then back to large, and that to me created a kind of perspectival feeling of leading your eye in. It might actually be more effective when you don't have all the colors working, just to see the text. If it was just like when I saw it originally just in black and white, the effect of that was actually perhaps stronger, but I wanted to make this.
Well, you mentioned that you were talking about the Beatles song and you thought that this theme of kind of losing your ego was important. How important is the text for you? Okay, now this is Walt Whitman, am I wrong, or is this?
No, this is a song of Erik. So this is the title piece. It's based on Mahler's Das Lied.
Oh, Mahler.
You're right.
Okay.
And he used Hans Bethge, a German poet, made German renderings of ancient Chinese poetry. And I used an English translation of that to make the painting. So what was interesting to me, similar with the Tomorrow Never Knows Beatles one, was that we had something, a text that was changing languages, changing forms, and going through time and space.
But this one is obviously based on kind of a landscape of autumn trees, something like that.
Well, that was what was interesting to me. This is a deceptive image because it appears to be that way because of the colors, but these are actually explosions. You're correct that it's a landscape, but these are palm trees here, and this is derived from Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now.
So it's from
the smell of napalm in the morning.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And one of the ideas for this was after the pattern pieces, I wanted to make one that would start with a pattern that I devised with shifting colors and shifting scale, and then go into a more random, landscape aspect in the middle, and then go back to the pattern at the bottom.
And this one here, you vary the size of the text from small to larger and larger to smaller, and that's nice. Now, you have kind of devised this typeface yourself. This isn't based on like Helvetica 12 or Arial
It wasn't referring
darker.
to anything. It's just my
Hottenschweller.
It's basic sans serif font. It's kind of just the most generic looking all caps letters I can make. And as always, I never paint the letters. I paint around them. So the colored ground is painted first, and then with these new ones, I'm doing a lot of gradations underneath them, which results in the letters in some places having a shift of color taking place within the letter, which is because I don't paint the letters, I paint the word blocks.
Right, okay. And this is all acrylic?
Yes.
Mostly on canvas, right? On linen?
But linen is canvas, I suppose.
Sure it is. You got cotton canvas, linen canvas. Okay.
This was the first one of the whole series. I did this, started this in January 1st, 2016.
Okay, we'll wrap up looking at this. This is a tree. I was thinking that, and you kind of blew my delusions away when you said that was a bunch of explosions in the last painting.
Right.
I was actually
desired effect. Yeah.
I was actually thinking that maybe some of these were based on kind of Hudson River School painters, maybe George Innes and some of those people who were dealing with very
It's definitely
simple.
Not on my mind, I would say.
But they were dealing with kind of simple, kind of classical landscape, but they were pushing it in a way that it turned into atmospheric abstraction.
Yes.
And then I was thinking if you could be linking that to some kind of Emersonian or Whitman-esque poetry, you'd be kind of playing a couple of different grounds, but you would probably only be interested in Whitman if you could get the Chinese translation of his copy from German.
I have some Thoreau in this one that you're looking at.
Really? Thoreau?
The Transcendentalist is definitely in the mix. This is a hodgepodge of short poems and quotes from a lot of different sources. Some are advisors in the 60s talking about how if we keep going at the rate we are now, there won't be anything left. Also John Muir, who in my mind was a visionary that should be paid much attention to. We also have the poet Wendell Berry, who's contemporary. I have some great quotes from Cezanne in here. Color is the place where our brain and the universe meet. I don't think says a lot.
Well, as long as you're not blind, if you can understand what color is.
That's a good point. This is based on my own photograph. I was in a nature conservancy wilderness on Shelter Island, and it was a beautiful experience. It's one of these places that no one else was even there, and you just have the whole place to yourself, and it's completely raw, unspoiled, serene.
So I think that you probably spent a lot of time designing these. I'm going to ask you a question about color. A lot of them also kind of have almost a theoretical design of color. You're talking about the work with kind of color theory things.
Mm-hmm.
What are your ideas about color and how it relates to the image and the text and some of these other questions or problems that you've raised with this?
Well, with something like this, I'm responding to the image that I begin with, and then I'm exaggerating things. And this one has a pretty intuitive color sense. It's it's largely green. I'm using
and earth
probably
tones,
30 different greens, and I actually wrote about that, and that text turned up in that green and red one that we saw earlier. I thought that I related it to tuning the colors and tuning my eyes.
How much of the text do you actually write yourself, and how much of it do you borrow?
In this show,
or appropriate?
I only used my own text for one of the medium-sized painting we saw, so all the rest are appropriations. But I'm looking to be using more of mine.
Here's another short question. I know that at one point when you did a previous show based on Beach Boys lyrics, that you had some problems with one of the lyric writers had gotten in touch with you and actually kind of put the kibosh on some sales and made it difficult. How did that turn out?
Well, he wrote a threatening letter and I wrote one back, and we kind of left it at that. I feel that I'm very much transforming the text. I'm not interested in pirating anything.
Are the paintings still in limbo, or have they moved on, or?
Well, life goes on.
Does he want some kind of a fee for using his text?
I think he wanted a 25% cut.
Well, tell him you give him a discount on buying one of the paintings if you'd like. Okay. Well, so this has been a look at Erik den Breejen's Song of the Earth.
Yes.
All right.
Thanks,
here.
Laura.
That's James Kalm.
Oh, sorry, James.
Here at Freight+Volume. What's the address here at Freight+Volume?
97 Allen Street.
97 Allen Street, and the show is up for how much longer?
Until December 4th.
Till December 4th. Right here on the Lower East Side. And say it with me, people. Thank you, Kate. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.